Pinochet's Chile. A case study in class oppression and dictatorship. Part 1, The Early Development of Chile. Hello, comrades. It's the Marxist-Leninist-Hoxha YouTuber here. I'm a young, 14-year-old Australian socialist particularly interested in past revolutions and workers' struggles. Today, I'll be discussing the circumstances and conditions of Chile, a country with both a deeply rooted tradition in socialism and colonialism. It has produced both some of the greatest socialist leaders so far, including Salvador Allende, yet it also holds a dark history of class oppression, racism and primitive fascism, which all culminated in Augusto Pinochet's disastrous 1973 coup and years of poverty and authoritarianism under his rule, following the triumphs of the democratically elected Marxist Salvador Allende. In this episode, we will be covering Chile's colonial and early independent history, from around 1600 AD through to the early 20th century and the beginning of its liberal democratic tradition in 1932. Why did Pinochet's military junta kill so many? This can only be revealed through a thorough material analysis. The Chilean Revolution, and its subsequent repression, were the testing grounds for electing revolutionaries to state power, the problems of governing a liberal democracy in workers' interests, and the struggle for power. Chile's modern history begins with the pre-colonial experiences of the Native American tribes. The native people of Chile arrived around 10,000 years ago, settling along fertile valleys and rivers. They lived lives devoid of hierarchy and oppression. The distinguished Chilean anthropologist Alejandro Lipschutz explains the nature and future conduct of the Chilean native Araucanian people through their society, classless, without lords and rulers. They simply could not stomach the idea of living under another human, valuing all life and labor instead as valuable. This resistance to hierarchy forged the admirable and remarkable spirit we see later. A massive disruption in this egalitarian form of life came with the arrival of Spanish conquistadors, arriving from Peru under the lead of Pedro de Valdivia, a military general still today lauded by bourgeois historians. Upon arriving in Chile circa 1540, Pedro de Valdivia founded Santiago and other Chilean cities. Still today, he is commemorated as a hero, a great leader of Chile's government, the streets of Santiago lined with imposing statues of his figure. Yet he was a brutal, bourgeois dictator, with the Nobel Prize-winning author Pablo Neruda speaking of him as a thief, a man who divided Chile up like a dead carcass, satisfying his cronies and fellow conquistadors. He brutally tortured Indian prisoners, and ultimately destroyed the country, leaving it a scarred, wounded place devoid of humanity or rights. To Neruda, the young Indian chiefs who led guerrilla resistance against Valdivia were the heroes, defeating the hated dictator in a battle and decisively lopping off his head. Yet are there any statues of these chiefs in Santiago today? This is where we see the ruling class dynamics cemented and entrenched in Chile's identity. The Chilean people were taught to see their fathers as Spanish and Portuguese, but in reality the racial fabric has always been far from homogeneous. When Valdivia and his murderous cronies arrived in the 16th century, they brought 150 men and only one woman, leading the Chilean people towards a fusion of races. While the ruling classes are still notably more Spanish than Indian, few Chileans are purely Spanish. This conquest and cultural genocide was valiantly resisted by the native Indian populations. Through 3 centuries of armed struggle, they fought for their rights. Initially, they tried to fight the Spaniards in open combat, but soon learning of the futility of this, they honed a precise guerrilla warfare. Everyone who knows of the Araucanians' military tactics speaks highly of them. Mao Zedong and Che Guevara even based their tactics on Araucanian success. This war left clear marks on the Chilean colony. It left the government hated, the people weary, and domestic lifestyles militarized and unstable. Despite their active and resilient struggle, they were eventually defeated. The first conquistadors were incapable agriculturalists. knowing nothing of the local soil or plants, so they hired Indian populations as a commandment by the colonial government, actively using them as slave labor. The Indians built houses, churches and schools. They did farm work. The general opinion of the Spanish populations was that the Indians were subhuman, little more than a dog. This belief reinforced the class relations of Chile to this day. In the 19th and 20th century, many non-Spanish immigrants arrived, from England, Yugoslavia, France, Scotland and countless other Western European nations. Even so, this new immigration only served to accentuate the class relations between the mestizo lower classes and predominantly white ruling classes. Walking around Santiago today, you see this. In the wealthy neighborhoods, for instance, Las Condes and La Reina, you see people of a predominantly European complexion. In the slums, in La Grandeur, you see people almost entirely mestizo, with Indian features and jet black hair. Most Chileans today would deny their nation is racist or built on oppression, but we clearly see now this is not the case, and it is this concealed, resisted racism that was brought to the fore in the reactionary response to Allende. Though we see the early conditions of the Chilean colony. In our next episode, we will be continuing with our study of Chile, looking at the period of 1932 to 1973, in which Allende and his Popular Unity Coalition came to power. Thanks for watching.